So let's say find x is equals to 3 over 4x plus 1 and g of x is equals to square root of 3x plus 5. So this is a question given to us. They said we should find f of g of x if f of x is equals to 3 over 4x plus 1 and g of x is equals to square root of what? 3x plus 5. And so simple. Follow the following steps. So the first thing I'm going to do in this question is to write my f of x, which is 3 over 4x plus 1. And I'm going to write g of x to be square root of what? 3x plus 5, right? So what am I to do? I'm to write f of x, f of g of x now. That means what this one implies is that anytime I see x, I'm going to put g of x. I have f of 4g of x plus 1. Is that clear? I know it's very clear. That means I'm representing x because x was here, x is here, right? If I'm changing this to be g of x ought to be here too, according to the definition of the function given to me from the question. And also, the question is very generous. They gave me g of x. I'm not going to stop here. What is the value of g of x? That is square root of what? 3x plus 5. And I'm going to substitute. I'm going to slot it in. I have 4. You can write it as 3x plus 5 raised to power 1 over 2 plus 1. So this is the same thing. Of course, from law of indices, you know that square root of 3x plus 5 is the same thing as what? 3x plus 5 raised to power 1 over 2. So I've not done anything. So the question is as simple as that. I believe you understand. Is that clear? Is there any question? Do anybody have any question based on what I've done? All right, let's see another example. So if this one is not clear to you, example 1 is not clear to you, I'm pretty sure that example 2 will be clear. So let me pick another example here. They said, if, number 2, f of x is equals to 4 over square root of what? 2x plus 1, g of x is equals to 2x plus 1, comma, h of x is equals to what? X minus 5. Find the following. Find the following. So I have f of h of 2, g of h of x, f of g of h of x, iv, f of h of g of x. Yeah, so these are the questions we want to consider now. And it may look very clumsy, but trust me, it's pretty simple. It's what you can do in a twinkling of an eye. So yeah, in this question 2, they give me, say, if f of x is equals to 4 over square root of 2x plus 1, and g of x is equals to 2x plus 1, h of x is equals to what? X minus 5. Find the following. The first thing given to us is that what? I should find f of h of 2. So quickly, I'm going to write my f of x, h of x, which is what? X minus 5. Is that clear? And I'm going to do as like this. I'll put 2 here because in the first question, they told me that I should find what? F of h of 2. So when I put 2 here, the implication is that my s is going to change to 2. So, and this one will now be what? 2 minus 5, and that will give me minus 3. Is that clear? So after doing that, and I will put it here now. I have f of h of 2. And like we did in example number 1, I'm going to replicate the same thing in example number 2 high. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to write 4 over square root of what? 2. Remember, it was x given to us from the question, from the definition of the function. Here it is what? H of what? 2. I'm going to put it there, plus 1. And don't forget, we've gotten our h of 2 here to be minus 3. And I'm going to write it back. I have 4 over square root of 2 times minus 3 plus 1. Is that clear? So I'm going to change it to be what? 4 over square root of what? Minus 3 times minus 2. 2 times minus 3 will give me minus 6. Minus 6 times minus 6 plus 1 will give me what? Minus 5. And of course, if you press calculator to find the square root of minus 5, it will give you math error. So already this one is already leading us to what we call imaginary number. In your algebra and coordinate or algebra and geometry, that is O1. I don't know if you still do complex number. I may be the one that will still take you complex number. But to write this properly, I can rewrite this as what? 4 over I root 5. So what do I do? How do I get I? I did what? Square root of what? Minus 1 times 5, right? And in law of sort, if I have square root of AB, I can separate the roots to be this. Is that clear? So I can write it as a square root of 1 minus 1 times square root of 5. And square root of minus 1 is I in complex number. So we call it complex number or imaginary number. So you must have done that in what? Quadratic equation also. So I can stop here depending on how the option comes to me. This can be in the option, or they may want to make it more tricky so that people will miss it by applying sort. You can rationalize this one. What do I mean by rationalization? You have to multiply both numerator and denominator by what is in the denominator. Let me illustrate it. I have I root 5 over I root what? 5. So 4 times I root 5. That will give me what? Let me write it here. So let me write it here. Where I stopped at 4 times I root 5 will give me what? 4I root 5. And if I have I times I, that is what? Square root of minus 1 times square root of minus 1. And that will give me 1. I believe you understand. Square root times square root. Or let's apply indices. Law of indices. If I have minus 1 raised to power 1 over 2 times minus 1 raised to power 1 over 2. Law of indices minus means what? Plus. I have minus 1 raised to power what? 1 over 2 plus 1 over 2. And that will give me what? Minus 1 raised to power 1. Right? Half plus half will give me 1. That is what? Minus 1. So that is clear. I times I will give me what? Minus 1. So I have minus 1 times root 5 times root 5 will give me what? 5. So my answer will now be what? Minus 4I over 5 root 5. And that is the answer of this first one. Depending on how the option comes, the option may stop here, the option may stop here, and of course, it can also stop here so that you know many students will miss it. So I'm done with the first question here. Is there any question? Do you have any question based on this first 2I? Let me know if you have a question. So in the absence of question, let's quickly go to I. So I have I here. And what am I to do in I? They said I should look for G of h of x. Exactly, G of h of x. And what do I mean by that? I'm going to write my G of x. My G of x is about 2x plus 1. So it's not x that is here. Note that it is h of x. I'm going to write 2 h of x exactly plus 1. And this is very trivial. It's very, very simple. I have 2. What is my h of x? X minus 5 plus 1. Exactly. And I have 2x because I'm expanding, minus 10 plus 1, and that will give me 2x minus 9, and I'm done with number I. So is that clear? Do you have any question? All right. So the third question here, I have f of g of h of x. This one looks kind of long, but nevertheless, there's not a problem. Remember, we've already looked for f of g of h of x here. We are going to just slot it in. So I can write this as f of g of h of x will just be 4 over square root of what? 2. Remember, in question II, this we have looked for h of g of h of x, which gave us 2x minus 9. That is what I'm going to do. That means f of g of h of x, I will just write it as this plus 1. Is that clear? Do you understand? Do you understand? So I will not bother myself to go and look for f of g of h of x again, because I've already done that in the previous question. So what is left for me to do is just to expand, and I have what? 4x minus 2 minus 18 plus 1, and that will give me 4 over square root of what? 4x minus 17. Just the question. I'm done with this one. So I want to rub off the first question I did here, so that I'm going to do the last question in it. So the last question in example 2, they said I should find f of h of g of x, right? So without wasting time, I'm just going to look for h of g of x first, so that it will be more simple for me, right? So h of g of x, that means I'm going to write, this is the function of f of h of x. H of x is equals to what? X minus 5, right? Because h of x is here. That is why x is here. So I'm changing it to g of x. It means that g of x should be here. Is that clear? Yeah, I know it's clear. So what is the value of g of x? They're giving us in the question. I have 2x plus 1 minus 5. And that will give me 2x minus 4. That is simple. So I will now slot it in inside h of x. I'm f of x. F of h of g of x. Right? So I have 4 over square root of what? 2 open brackets, 2x minus 4 plus 1. So without wasting time, I'm going to expand this. I have this one here. I have 4x minus 8 plus 1, and I have what? 4 over square root of what? 4x minus 7. So I'm done with example 2. Is that clear? Do you have any question? So next time, whenever you see composite function, it's like we've done it, you can solve more questions, check your past question, go online, you can see as many questions as possible there, so that your hand will be very, very hard on it. You will know it better when you solve plenty questions. That is the secret of knowing mathematics. You want to solve as many questions as possible. So that is that about that. So I mentioned in my introduction before now that we are going to do composite function and inverse. So we've done composite function now. The next thing we want to do now is inverse of a function. And what do I mean by inverse of a function? Because if you don't really know what we are doing, it may be very difficult for you to visualize it on your head. So now, from the definition of function, we know that for every value of y, there must be a corresponding x, or from every value of x, there must be a corresponding y. And in other words, if I put it in mathematical terms, it means that for every domain, there must be an equal corresponding codomain. So now, when we have the codomain, we are trying to get the domain. For example, now I'm going to illustrate it. So, if I say y is equals to 4x plus 1, right? So I have y is equals to 4x plus 1, and this is y. It can be written like this. This is x, where x will be any number in what? In natural number. Let's just say 1, 2, 3. That means for me to get this value of, this is my domain, this is my codomain, right? So this is y, this is x. Sorry, let's flip it around. X supposed to be here. So this is my x here. X is always the domain. This is my y here. Y is the codomain. So x is picked from the set of natural number. I have 1, 2, 3. So for me to get my value of y, I will say when x is equals to 1, I'm going to put the value of x here. That will be 4 times 1 plus 1, and that will give me 5. Right? This one here, 2. That is 4 times 2 plus 1. That will give me 9. And this one here, 3. When x is equals to 3, I have what? 13. So, it is they did not give us y here. We just find it, right? Imagine they left us with this equation and they did not give us what x is. So, they just give us what y is. And they say we should find the value of x. So that means we are moving from the codomain to the domain. And that is what we mean by inverse. When we come from here to this place, it's called the inverse. So I wrote some question for you in the composite function. We are still going to consider that also. So let me pick some question on this inverse. So number 1, find the inverse. Find the inverse of f of x is equals to 2x squared plus 5. Look at this. They say we should find the inverse of 2x squared plus 5. So in the actual sense, what we are doing, we are moving from the codomain to the domain. So look at how I'm going to do it. So follow this step. Solution. So the first thing I'm going to do is to write the function given to me, which is f of x is equals to 2x squared plus 5, right? So the second step is to do let y be equals to f of x. So what do I mean by that? F of x is equals to 2x squared plus 5, and let my y be that. That means I can write y as what? 2x squared plus 5. So the next duty for me to do is to make my s the subject of formula. So if I've successfully done that, I've gotten my answer. So I want to make s the subject of formula here. The first thing I'm going to do is to move this 5 to the other side. I have 5x, y minus 5 is equals to what? 2s squared. Is that clear? So I know it's very clear. So what am I going to do next? 2 is hindering x, right? So I'm going to divide both sides by 2, so that my s squared will be equals to what? Y minus 5 over 2. I'm not done because I want to have only s at the left-hand side of my equation. So what am I going to do? I'm going to square root both sides. So this square will cancel this square root. My answer will be what? Square root of what? Y minus 5 over 2. So I've successfully done this. So what is the next thing to do? I'll just say replace y with x, right? So I'll just say f inverse of x will be equals to what? Square root of what? X minus 5 over 2, and I'm done. So this is how to find the inverse of a function. So whatever you are given, you just say let y be equals to the function given to you. Then you make x the subject of formula. And when you make x the subject of formula, you just replace y with x. Then you put the inverse symbol there and you are done. So let's do another example so that we have a perfect understanding on this inverse. So funny enough, I've seen some question in the JUPEB past question. Sometimes they can be very funny, bringing composite function inside inverse of a function. I'm going to talk about that, but let me quickly do this. Number 2, under inverse, I have given f of x is equals to 3x plus 2, and g of x is equals to 2x squared plus 1, right? So find the following. All right. So the following will be I have f of g inverse of x. F of g inverse of x. I f inverse of g inverse of x. Imagine they say you should find f inverse of g inverse of x. I f of g inverse of f inverse of x. So let's consider this, just these 3 examples on this. So I want to solve it now. So now, for me to do this, the first thing I'm going to do, I'll still follow the same procedure. They gave me 2 functions, f of x and g of x, and my f of x is equals to 3x plus 2. My g of x is equals to 2x squared plus 1, right? So they say you find f of g inverse of x. So if my first duty is to find g inverse of x, I'll just say let y be equals to what? G of x. So I will now write y is equals to 2x squared plus 1. So this is what I have. I want to make this as the subject of formula. The first thing I'm going to do, if I'm to do that, is to bring this 1 here. And if 1 is crossing the equals to sign, to change to -1. I have what? Y minus 1 is equals to 2x squared, right? Divide both sides by 2. So I have x squared is equals to what? Because this one will cancel this, y minus 1 over 2. So I'm going to square root both sides. So when I square root both sides, this one will go away, and I'm going to have x is equals to square root of y minus 1 over 2. I'll just replace y by x, so that my g inverse of x will be equals to the square root of what? X minus 1 over 2. So this is my what? This is my g inverse. So I can then represent it. Then let me write here so that I will manage the space. This is I. So I'm going to do f of g inverse of x will now be what? 3 plus g inverse of x plus 2. 3 plus g inverse of x plus 2. Because our x was here before, now we're having g inverse. And what is the value of our g inverse? It will now be what? 3 square root of x minus 1 over 2 plus 2. And that's my answer for the first question. So the second question here, let me write it here. So I want to look for f inverse and g inverse. So luckily for me, I've looked for g inverse here. So I want to look for f inverse. So quickly, without wasting, like here, I will continue from where I stop here. So I've already looked for what f of g inverse of what of x here, right? And the answer is what 3 root what x plus x minus 1 over 2 plus 2. So for me to look for f inverse of all these functions, this composite function, so I'm going to just say let my y represent everything here. Let my y represent the function which is what 3 root what x minus 1. To make a sort of formula here, and what am I going to do? I want to bring these 2 to the other side first. I have what y minus 2 is equals to 3 square root of what x minus 1 over 2. Yes, so I'll divide both sides by 3. So when I divide both sides by 3, I'm going to have I'm going to have x minus 1 over 2 is equals to what? Y minus 2 over 3. Then I will square both sides. When I square both sides, I have what? This square will cancel the square root. I have x minus 1 over 2 is equals to what? Y minus 2 all square over 9. So that means the square belongs to what is in the numerator and what is in the denominator. That is why I separated it. Square of 3 is 9. So what am I to do? I want to multiply both sides by 2 so that 2 will be here, 2 will be here. This one will cancel this. I have x minus 1 is equals to 2 open bracket y minus 2 all square over 9. Then I bring 1 to this side. X is equals to 2 open bracket y minus 2 all square over 9 minus plus 1, right? So you can find the LCM so that you have 2y minus 2 all square plus 9 over 9. If you find the LCM, this is what you are going to get. So you now replace, and when you replace it like that, replace y with x, you now have f inverse of what? G inverse of x. Is that clear? So I will have what 2x minus 2 all square plus 9 over 9. So that is my answer for this question. Is that clear? So yeah, I will leave this third one for you as an assignment, but I will not leave you in the dark. So I will just explain how you are going to do it, and in my next class, I want you to show me what you have done. So what are you going to do? You have to follow my footstep. So the first thing for you to do is to make this function. You have to find the inverse of f of x. So how do you find it? Make f of x to be equals to y. You have y is equals to 3x plus 2. You bring it there, you bring 2 there, and you are going to evaluate it. So already we found, if you look at number 1, we found g inverse of x. And when we find g inverse of x, we just put 2 of them together and you get your answer. So any question from what we've learned so far? If you have any question, let me know. All right. So you can go online, check more questions, because a function is not limited to only polynomials, because all what we've done today, all what I've shown you today is restricted to polynomials. We have trigonometric function, we have hyperbolic function, we have exponential function, we have inverse trigonometric function, we have logarithmic function, all kinds of function. In fact, in 01, you are still going to do what we call transcendentals. That means when they bring polynomial function with another functions together, be it exponential function or logarithmic function, and they set it as an equation, and they will now tell you to solve, to find the value of whatever the variable given to you in the question. So that is that. So with the knowledge of this, we will be able to do limits, you'll be able to do differentiation and integration. So thank you very much. So next week, Monday, we are meeting same time. Do you get me now? So before next week, Monday, you must have done practice a lot of questions